category is not generally the most um, predominant outcome for our 911 response with co-responders. In some places, it's very close, if not the highest. In the 4th precinct, there was the most common determination that our co-responders came to was being able to leave them at home. The most likely one is either hospital or crisis. That becomes because of the fact that most often on these dispatched calls, there is already an emergency going on. These are not our follow-up calls or trying to provide further services. There's generally there is a predicating emergency event. But it's very promising to see that in most precincts, it is very, very close second, or if not, the most common determination is being able to leave people in the home. The amount of arrests that we make is extraordinarily negligible. Some precincts it was 0, and the most I think that we came in one precinct was 5 in 1 year. Again, out of 2,270 total contacts. That is there any further questions anyone has regarding that?
I don't have any further questions. I'm not sure if folks, if you do, if you could indicate them in the chat or raise your hand. I will move on to the next question, and which is question number 10. Have programs within the police department been transferred to the Office of Violence Prevention or other city departments, particularly recently? If so, what programs have been transferred? Have such transfers been helpful for managing public safety, or have they damaged the MPD's ability to provide for public safety? And have such transfers, if any, freed up MPD's budget, or has funding moved out of the MPD's budget along with the programs? It's a very loaded question. I know you all have talked a bit about some of the programs, but specifically as it relates to the transfer and the budget, that would be helpful. Chief Arredondo?
Yes, Madam Chair. So thank you for the question. There have not been any specific MPD programs transferred to the Office of Violence Prevention. We continue to work closely with the Office of Violence Prevention, most notably the Group Violence Intervention Program, where we work closely with Director Cotton, those credible messengers who are out there to try to reduce and prevent group violence. And so, looking at the transfer question of it. Yes, and as the mayor may have indicated already, he has already looked at the 2021 budget, allocating $2.5 million to the Office of Violence Prevention to again assist and help those efforts there. There were funds that had, I believe, the 2020 budget final, I believe it might have been the final markup of that, where there were funds that were also transferred to the Office of Violence Prevention as well. But in terms of actual programs transferred, to date, that has not occurred.
Great. Thank you for that, Chief. And funding, just as a follow-up, has any funding been moved out of the budget?
Madam Chair, yes. So I want to say that at the last cycle of the 2020 budget, there may have been anywhere from 1.1 to 1.8 million. And then again, as the mayor indicated for the 2021 budget, he's already looking at 2.5 million. So yes, there has been funding that has been removed from the MPD budget over to that OVP. Yes.
Great, thank you for that. I believe Commissioner Garcia has a question.
I do. Thank you, Chief. Thanks for being here. With that question, notwithstanding any potential future changes to the charter, while programs may not be formally transferred, are there, and this may be a 2/3-parter. First, are there any intentional efforts to collaborate with the Office of Violence Prevention and other related city departments in terms of actual coordination, regular coordination meetings and planning meetings? Specifically, if I may give a plug to, in doing so, modeling changes to culture and cooperation across the board. Whatever differences may have existed as we went into the charter amendment vote, I indeed hope that everyone is coordinating and collaborating in good faith on behalf of the residents of Minneapolis. So I think modeling these types of communication and coordination is essential. And then my second part is, while there has been funding also going to other state or city department areas, is there intentional planning and coordination with you, MPD, about, while funding goes someplace else, that to ensure perhaps that programming kind of dovetails and feathers in to your overall mission, so that in a holistic sense, while it may not be MPD funding, in a holistic sense, it's all trying to achieve the same goal and get on the same page. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, to Commissioner Garcia, thank you so very much for that thoughtful question. Am I still with the group here? Testing.
You are.
Oh, okay. Madam Chair, to Commissioner Garcia's questions. So yes, we absolutely have, and I have intentional efforts to build and strengthen those relationships with other city enterprise departments. I mentioned the Office of Violence Prevention, but also working closely with Director David Rubador's teams from the Neighborhood Community Relations team. They have been instrumental on several different areas throughout our city. Most recently, they have been very helpful if you have been following 38th in Chicago, and bringing together communities to have very intentional, authentic dialogue in terms of what that space looks like moving forward. NCR has also been very helpful for the MPD over the past several years, as it relates to when we, this is pre-COVID, but when we would have community gatherings in spaces, making sure that such things as interpreters were there to represent our communities, make sure that flyers and mailings were in those languages that were spoken in those communities. They have done a great job in terms of our outreach with our Indigenous people. So that's one area. Public health, we continue to work and lean on public health. Obviously, pandemic now, I mean, there's a lot of things that are impacting us. Some of you are certainly aware of when we've had many of our the homeless encampments around our city, those experiencing homelessness. Just this morning and throughout the last several weeks, over in South Minneapolis near Hiawatha, our Lieutenant Grant Snyder has been working closely with public health and CPED and other folks to try to really, how do we bring dignity to the folks out there, but at the same time trying to make sure that those who are unsheltered have decent places to really be protected and be sheltered. So we absolutely will continue to work with those enterprises. And Commissioner Garcia, we need that. As you mentioned, community safety is a holistic approach. We cannot do it. I'll be the first to tell you. The police department's not going to be able to do this all on our own. So we need the value and talent of those other city enterprise leaders. A couple of other things in terms of just with the MPD. For those of you who may not know, it was back towards the tail end of then Mayor Betsy Hodges. She had asked me, I came in my role as the interim chief at the time, and she said, Rondo, is there anything within this budget now that you've inherited that you would want to see differently? And I said, yes, I talked about this creation of having a community navigators. And so for those of you on the line, when she originally asked me, I asked for at least 24. After she laughed hysterically, she said, well, I'll give you 6. And so, but I said, I will take them. And they continue to do great work. And those community navigators have been working with those other OVP, NCR, our public health folks. They've been out there at the Wall of the Forgotten and other places throughout our city. And so I'm a firm believer in that holistic approach, Commissioner Garcia, that you mentioned, and we'll continue to do that moving forward. And so thank you for that very thoughtful question.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to move to the next question here. We have a similar question regarding transfers of programs with respect to community outreach functions. Have such programs been transferred to other departments, or are there plans to do so? If so, have the consequences or impact of such transfers on MPD been considered or understood, not only for the coming year, but also for the future? I know that you and the mayor talked a bit about, making some decisions on responding into calls versus, some of the outreach and engagement work that pre-COVID and pre-civil unrest you all were doing. So if you could speak more to that related to this question, that would be great.
Yes, Madam Chair, to that question, I may have Deputy Chief Force chime in as well here. So one of the things that I know that there has been a working group, particularly related to the 911, 311. What types of calls, again, can be triaged? Are there certain enterprises within the city that can help and respond to those types of calls? And again, as we look at the department and we look at the impacts of staffing, we may absolutely do more in terms of some of those contingency planning and seeing what other enterprises within the city can take on some of those roles as well. So, Deputy Chief Force, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, sir. That is, you're 100% accurate with that. I mean, we are very much engaged with the 911 working group, which is really designed to try to see if there are alternatives to just sending police to some of these calls and what that might look like, and the whole goal is to identify situations or circumstances or different things that I think that police emergency response is not necessarily the best response, and how can we either go about utilizing things such as 311 to maybe take reports on things that might free up some response, but then also looking at doing deep dives in terms of mental illness. And there's a lot that needs to move forward with this. Ideally, the mechanism we would like for mental health response doesn't exist as of yet, and the best kind of cooperative response we have is the co-responder program that still requires some police interaction, but it's a lot more specialized and holistic than just a uniformed squad going. Additionally, we've looked at that also surrounding the opioid epidemic, addiction, homelessness, and those are areas that we continue to explore.
Great. So we're at 6:02, and I'm sure folks are ready for dinner or just to be done on video calls for the day, including us as charter commissioners. So we want to be respectful of your time. There are 3 questions that we didn't get to. The mayor did touch base on the last question, and I wanted to intentionally ask him that. If you all have, wanted to take an opportunity to respond to those in writing and submitting those through the clerk's office, that would be that would be great. But I think at this point, we are going to conclude the interview portion of this. Just wanted to say, we already said to the mayor, thank you, but again, publicly, thank you for your time. Chief Arredondo, thank you for your time and the work that you're doing. Deputy Chief Forrest, thank you so much for your time as well. And so now we'll move to the third part of the agenda, which is next steps. Commissioner Rubenstein, do you have next steps options for us?
I just wanted to mention, Commissioner Newborn, that our next meeting is in 2 weeks. And at that time, Commissioner Lucero of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights is going to give us something of an update on the investigation and what's happening there. And we'll also have people from the Office of Racial Equity in the city. And so I think we'll be looking at all these issues from a racial justice lens. So I am looking forward to a very engaging session and wanted to add thank you to Chief Arredondo and Deputy Chief Forrest and the mayor, and just to thank you for a most interesting session and for your time today.
Great. Commissioner Cohen, it seems like you have your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Kozak.
Kozak.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. The K's always get me. Commissioner Kozak, I apologize. Yes.
Madam Chair, that's just fine. I wanted to certainly thank the chief, the deputy chief, and the mayor. This is a very, very informative and illustrative session. But I had when I read the paper this morning, I saw an article, an op-ed from an officer from I believe, the 3rd Precinct. And we've heard from the city council, from the mayor, and the chief, and others who have given their time. And I know we're going to hear, as Commissioner Rubenstein said, we're going to hear from folks in 2 weeks. But I thought, given what I read about in the paper, that I would like to hear from the regular officer's perspective. And I know that the lawyer for the Federation, and I've talked to him, and I think they have some interesting things to say without getting into the nitty-gritty of the negotiations with the city. But just some perspective, and for example, the question that I thought that the chief did a good job of answering, to the allegation or the suggestion that that the officers were purposely slowing down their response. And I think I would like to hear from the perspective of the regular officers, and without getting into all the details and the arguments about in the negotiations on the contract. I'd like to hear, or at least some way that we get some perspective from the officers. And I know I suggested this, Commissioner Rubenstein, Madam Chair, and we may not have time, but and I don't want to make a motion, but I'm just raising it and see if we can find some time at a subsequent meeting to at least hear, to get some of that perspective. And we can set ground rules and what's permitted to talk about and all that. But and I think we'd find some interesting things, as I've heard some interesting that aren't contentious, but that might have will have some bearing on the final report we give.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Kozak, for that suggestion and question. So I think that what we'd like to do is connect with Commissioner and Chair Rubenstein to see and assess how that's going to, whether we can, and if we can incorporate that into our work plan. And it sounds like based off of the chat, there's some interest in that, and from the other commissioners on the work group. And then Chief Arredondo will follow up with you to determine who and how that would work with talking with one of your officers. So thank you so much, Commissioner Kozak. We appreciate that, and we will get back to the group about next steps and how we incorporate that into our current work plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much.
Yes,
Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome. Okay, great. Again, to see some interest in that happening. Again, thank you so much, Chief Arredondo.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Commissioners, thank you so very much.
Great, great. And with that, if there's no objections, we will now adjourn the meeting.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great meeting.
Have a
Thanks
good
a
one.
lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you very much.
Good.